James had always lived a quiet life. His small house sat at the edge of town, surrounded by fields that stretched out like golden waves under the sun. Every morning, he would rise early, long before the birds began their songs, and step outside to breathe in the fresh country air. There was a certain peace in the routine of his days, feeding the chickens, tending to the garden, and checking on his small herd of cows. The work was honest and steady, and it gave him purpose. Yet, beneath this calm surface, there was a loneliness that pressed against his chest, like a constant weight. He had friends, of course. A few neighbors who would stop by for coffee or to share a story about the town. But friendships could never fill the deeper ache of wanting someone to share the quiet moments with. Someone to laugh with over small victories or cry with when life felt heavy. James often found himself thinking about the life he had imagined as a boy. A warm home filled with love, laughter, and family. That dream had always seemed a little out of reach, and as the years passed, it began to feel as if it might remain just a dream. On some days, James allowed himself to feel sorry for his solitude. He would sit in his favorite chair by the window, watching the sunlight dance on the fields, and imagine a woman sitting across from him, smiling, maybe holding a cup of tea, just the way he liked it. He thought about the kind of person who could understand his quiet nature, who would not mind the slow pace of his life, and who would bring warmth into the small house that sometimes felt too big for one person. But these were only fleeting thoughts. Moments of hope quickly tucked away as he returned to the rhythm of his work. James had been in a few relationships in his younger years, but none had lasted. He had tried to find love close to home, in the familiar faces of his town, but for some reason, the connection never felt right. The women he had dated often had different dreams that required moving to the city, or living a faster-paced life than he could ever imagine. Each parting left him quieter than before, more certain that perhaps love was something meant for other people, not him. And yet, even with all the disappointments, he had not given up hope. He had a stubborn belief that somewhere, someone was out there waiting for him, just as he waited for them. It was one quiet evening, sitting by the fireplace with a cup of hot tea, that James began to consider a path he had never truly thought he would take. He had heard of men in his town and beyond who had found love through mail-order brides. At first, the idea seemed strange, even a little foreign to him, but as he thought more about it, he realized it was not about novelty or convenience. It was about the chance to meet someone who wanted the same life he did, someone who valued honesty, kindness, and the quiet joys that made life beautiful. The thought gave him a spark of hope, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The following days were filled with research and careful thought. James wanted to approach this seriously, not as a fleeting adventure, but as a real chance to find a companion, a partner, a soulmate. He read stories of people who had met through letters and correspondence, who had built lives together even from thousands of miles apart. He liked the idea of getting to know someone through words first, of sharing thoughts, dreams, and fears before meeting in person. It felt safer, slower, and somehow more meaningful than rushing into a relationship. Despite the excitement, James approached this new chapter with caution. He knew that trust had to be earned, that hearts could be fragile, and that expectations could sometimes lead to disappointment. Each night, he sat by the window and imagined the kind of woman he hoped to meet. She would be gentle but strong, patient but passionate, with a heart that could love deeply and openly. He imagined sharing quiet evenings by the fire, cooking meals together, walking through the fields, and talking about everything and nothing at all. He didn't need perfection, he only needed someone whose heart could match his own. The town watched quietly as James embarked on this journey. Some neighbors were curious, others skeptical. A few old friends raised their eyebrows, unsure if this path would bring happiness or heartache. But James paid them little mind. He had spent too long living for others' expectations. This time, he would follow his own heart, even if it led him into unknown territory. He believed that love, in whatever form it came, was worth the risk. Days turned into weeks as James wrote his first letters, carefully choosing words that reflected his true self. He spoke of his life, his routines, the work he loved, and the small joys that brought him happiness. He admitted his loneliness openly, hoping for honesty in return. He didn't try to impress with grand gestures or wealth. He offered only the truth of who he was. Each letter was sent with hope and a touch of nervous excitement, wondering who might read his words and feel the same spark of connection. The act of writing became a comforting ritual. Each morning, he would sit at his small desk by the window, pen in hand, and imagine the woman who might one day respond. Who was she? What did her mornings look like? Did she enjoy the quiet, simple pleasures of life, or did she long for adventure? These questions filled his mind, and each answer he hoped to find in the letters that might come back. Evenings were the hardest, for in the silence of his home, the loneliness returned with a sharper edge. He would walk through the garden or sit on the porch, listening to the wind rustle the trees, thinking of what could be. But in that quiet, he also found a strange comfort. The hope of love, even distant, made the emptiness more bearable. He was not simply waiting for a woman to arrive, he was preparing his heart, practicing patience, and learning to value the small moments that made life meaningful. As the weeks passed, James began to notice small changes in himself. He smiled more readily, laughed more freely, and carried a lighter step through the fields. The anticipation of a letter, the thought of a potential connection, had awakened something he thought he had lost. He began to dream of life not just as a series of routines, but as a journey that could be shared. The simple act of hoping, of believing in the possibility of love, transformed the quiet man in the small town into someone ready to embrace the unknown. James had never felt fully complete on his own. But he was learning that the path to finding love required more than just waiting. It required courage, openness, and faith that hearts could meet even across great distances. He did not know what the future held, nor did he know if his letters would find a kindred spirit. But for the first time in a long time, he felt the stirring of true anticipation, a sense that life might soon bring something extraordinary. Every morning, as he stepped out into the fields, he carried a small secret hope in his heart, that one day soon, someone would read his words, understand his heart, and respond in kind. And when that day came, when the long-awaited letter finally arrived, James was ready not just with a home prepared, but with a heart open and willing to embrace the love he had waited for all these years. Even in the quiet solitude of his small house, James had begun to understand something profound. That love often comes to those who are patient, who remain true to themselves, and who dare to hope even when the world seems still. And so, with each passing day, he continued his work, tended his animals, and nurtured his garden, all while nurturing the seed of hope in his heart that one day, someone would come to share this life with him, and in that shared life, he would finally feel complete. After several weeks of waiting, James finally received a reply. The envelope felt heavier than any he had held before, and the handwriting on the front made his heart skip a beat. Inside was a letter from Elena, a woman from a distant country who had responded to his carefully written words. Her handwriting was neat, flowing across the page, and each word seemed to carry a warmth that made James smile before he even began reading. As he read, he felt a strange and wonderful connection. Elena wrote about her life, the small apartment she lived in, the quiet mornings she enjoyed with a cup of tea, and the work she loved. She spoke of her dreams for the future, dreams that included family, kindness, and finding someone to share life with. She did not try to impress with grandeur or wealth. Instead, she offered honesty and openness. Every line he read made him feel that here was someone who might truly understand him, someone who longed for the same simple joys he did. James carefully wrote back, describing the little things in his life. The way the morning sun would touch his garden, the sound of the chickens in the yard, and the small victories he found in tending to his animals. He told her about his favorite chair by the window, where he often sat with a cup of tea, imagining what life could be like with someone special by his side. Each letter was filled with hope and careful thought, a way to share not just facts, but his heart. Their correspondence grew quickly. They wrote daily, sharing moments from their lives and thoughts that they had never told anyone else. Elena would tell James about a funny incident at work, or a new recipe she had tried, and he would respond with a small story from his day, or a joke he hoped would make her laugh. Despite the distance and differences in their cultures, they found common ground in the simple joys of life. Morning walks, favorite foods, and a love for honesty and kindness. As the weeks passed, James felt a transformation inside him. The letters brought him excitement, anticipation, and a sense of connection he had not felt in years. He found himself thinking about Elena constantly, imagining her smile, the sound of her laugh, and the way she might walk through the fields surrounding his home. Every letter she sent seemed to bring her closer, even though they had never met in person. There were moments of nervousness, too. James often wondered if the connection he felt was real, or just a product of his imagination. What if she didn't like him when they met? What if the reality was different from the image they had created in words? These thoughts would sometimes make him pause before writing his next letter, forcing him to take a deep breath and remind himself that honesty and patience were the best ways forward. Elena, too, shared her own feelings of excitement and nervousness. She wrote about the doubts she had, the questions she wondered about James, and the careful hope she carried in her heart. In her letters, she asked about his daily life, his favorite memories, and what he imagined for the future. Every question was a small bridge connecting them across thousands of miles, building trust and understanding. Over time, their letters became more than just words, they became a lifeline. On days when James felt particularly lonely, he would reread Elena's letters, feeling her presence in his home as if she were there with him. He would read them aloud to himself, imagining her voice, the warmth of her words filling the quiet spaces in his house. For Elena, it was the same. She found herself reading James's letters again and again, imagining his hands working in the garden, his eyes lighting up when he smiled, and the gentle kindness that radiated from every line he wrote. As the bond deepened, they began to share small secrets and personal dreams. James told her about the first time he realized he loved the quiet countryside, and how it made him feel at peace. He shared the story of his childhood dog, who had been his loyal companion for many years, and the small garden he had nurtured since he was a boy. Elena responded with stories of her family, the traditions she cherished, and the small joys of her life that made her feel happy and fulfilled. Each revelation brought them closer, creating a sense of intimacy that felt real and precious. Despite the joy of their growing connection, the distance remained a challenge. There were days when a letter would take longer than expected, and James would feel a small pang of worry. What if something happened to her? What if her feelings had changed? He reminded himself that trust was essential, that this journey required patience and faith. And when the letters did arrive, carefully folded and filled with her thoughts, it was as if sunlight had broken through the clouds, filling his heart with warmth. The excitement of anticipation began to take on a tangible form. Elena had finally agreed on a date to visit, a moment they had both dreamed of for months. James could hardly believe it when he received her letter confirming the details, the day, the time, and even the flight she would take. His heart raced as he read each line, imagining her stepping off the plane or train and into his life. He felt a mixture of joy, nervousness, and disbelief that someone he had never met in person was about to become a real presence in his home. Preparation became part of the daily rhythm of anticipation. James cleaned every corner of his house, arranged fresh flowers in vases, and made sure everything was ready for her arrival. He cooked meals he hoped she would enjoy, bought fresh linens, and even took time to plan small surprises to make her feel welcome. It was not about impressing her with grandeur or wealth. It was about showing care, thoughtfulness, and the desire to create a warm and loving home. In the evenings, he would sit by the window and imagine the first moments of meeting Elena. What would she say? How would she smile? Would she be as nervous as he was? He imagined the shy glances, the first handshake or hug, and the small moments of awkward laughter that would soon turn into comfort and ease. Each thought made his heart beat faster. but also filled him with hope and certainty that this connection was real. As the day of her arrival approached, James found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. It was not just letters and words, it was patience, honesty, and the willingness to take a chance on love. He realized that their bond had already grown strong, rooted in shared values and mutual respect. The thought that soon they would meet in person, and that the words they had exchanged would take on new life in reality, filled him with a joy he had not known in years. On the morning of her departure from her country, James felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, unlike anything he had ever experienced. He could hardly wait to meet Elena, to finally see the woman whose words had become such an important part of his life. He imagined the journey she was making, the long flight, the unfamiliar surroundings, and the courage it must take for her to travel so far to meet someone she had only known through letters. His admiration for her courage grew with each passing moment. He thought about the future they might build together, the small, cozy home filled with laughter, the walks through the fields, and the quiet evenings spent sharing stories. He imagined the little traditions they could create, the meals cooked together, and the simple joys of life shared between two hearts that had found each other against the odds. The possibilities were endless, and the hope that had been growing in his heart for so long now felt ready to bloom. Even as he tended to his daily chores, he carried the thought of Elena with him. Every sound, every smell, every sight seemed to remind him of the connection they had nurtured. The wind rustling through the trees felt like her presence. The sunlight on the field seemed to mirror the warmth of her letters. He was no longer just living for routine, he was living for the anticipation of love, for the moment when words would become reality, and for the day when their hearts would meet in the same space for the first time. Finally, the day of her arrival arrived. James could hardly focus on anything else. He checked the time repeatedly, made sure the house was perfect, and paced the floors in nervous excitement. Each sound outside made him startle, wondering if it might be her at last. His heart felt full, anxious, and expectant all at once. The letters that had brought them together now felt like a bridge between two worlds, and he was ready to cross it. As he stood by the window, looking toward the distant horizon where he would first see her, James felt a profound sense of hope and certainty. He had waited, he had dreamed, and he had prepared. Soon, the words, the laughter, and the warmth of their letters would take shape in a real, living presence. And when that moment came, he knew that life would change forever, not just because of her arrival, but because two hearts, patient and hopeful, had finally found each other. The morning air was crisp and quiet, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and dew-covered grass. James stepped outside, taking a deep breath as he surveyed his small farm. The animals were settled in their routines, the chickens clucking softly, and the cows grazing peacefully in the distance. Yet, for James, the routine of the farm had taken on a new significance. Every task, every chore, now felt connected to someone he had yet to meet, a woman whose letters had brought life and color into his quiet existence. He spent the morning tending to the garden, planting a few extra flowers near the porch, imagining how Elena might smile when she saw them. Their bright petals seemed to him like tiny messengers of hope, whispering that soon the waiting would end. He cleaned the house meticulously, dusting corners that rarely saw attention and arranging fresh linens on the bed he had prepared for her. Every small detail mattered, because he wanted her to feel welcome, safe, and cherished from the moment she stepped through the door. James found himself pacing at times, caught between excitement and nervous anticipation. He ran through conversations in his mind, imagining their first meeting, the awkward laughter, and the shy glances that might accompany their first handshake or hug. He wondered if the reality would match the image he had created from months of letters, if the warmth he felt through her words would translate into real-life smiles and laughter. The thought made his heart pound, but it also filled him with hope stronger than anything he had felt in years. The days seemed to stretch endlessly as he prepared. Friends and neighbors occasionally stopped by, noticing the unusual energy around James. Some teased him gently, asking if he was planning a party, while others offered advice, curious about the woman who had captured his attention so fully without ever meeting him. James would smile and nod, but he kept most of his thoughts private. This was not a tale to share casually, it was something precious. Something he needed to experience fully, for himself. Each evening, he would sit by the window, gazing out at the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. He imagined Elena walking along the streets of his small town, her own heart beating with anticipation. As she approached the life they had begun to build together in letters, the distance between them felt both immense and inconsequential. Bridged by words, trust, and hope, he could almost feel her presence, as though the letters had already made her a part of his home and his heart. James also spent time preparing meals he hoped she would enjoy. He cooked carefully, thinking about flavors and dishes that were comforting, warm, and inviting. Each pot simmering on the stove was a small act of care, a message of welcome he wanted to convey without words. He set the table with neat precision, placing a small vase of fresh flowers in the center, imagining the conversation they might share over dinner when she arrived. Even small touches, like folding napkins just so or lighting a candle, felt like important gestures of love and hospitality. Despite his excitement, James experienced moments of doubt. He would sit quietly in the evenings, staring at the flickering fire in the fireplace, and wonder what would happen if things didn't go as planned. What if Elena didn't like the house? What if the bond they had formed through letters didn't survive the first meeting? These thoughts would sometimes make him restless, pacing from room to room, before reminding himself that love required risk. It required courage to step into the unknown and trust that hearts would find each other despite fear and uncertainty. He also thought about her journey, imagining the long hours of travel she would endure to reach him. He pictured her boarding the plane, nervous yet excited, perhaps glancing out the window at the clouds below and thinking of the man she had come to know through letters. The thought of her courage filled him with admiration and a deepening affection. She was taking a leap of faith, and he vowed to honor that courage with every word, every gesture, and every moment he spent preparing for her arrival. Neighbors and friends occasionally offered small gestures of help. Some brought flowers or fresh bread, sensing the joy and nervous energy radiating from James. Others shared tips on local customs or the best places to greet a visitor arriving from afar. Though he appreciated their kindness, James knew that this moment, this meeting, was something personal, a turning point that only he and Elena could experience together. Everything else was background, supporting the story that was about to unfold. As the arrival day drew nearer, James found himself reflecting on the months that had led him here. He thought of the letters, the shared dreams, the laughter, and even the moments of uncertainty. Each word had been a step toward this day. Each shared thought, a thread weaving them closer together. The anticipation had transformed him, making his life feel fuller, more vibrant, and more alive than it had in years. What had started as cautious hope had grown into an unwavering certainty that love could indeed be found, even across distance and difference. The night before her arrival was the hardest. James sat in his favorite chair, a cup of tea in hand, staring at the stars through the window. The quiet of the night seemed to amplify every thought, every feeling. He thought about her smile, her laugh, and the gentle tone in her letters. He imagined the sound of her voice greeting him for the first time, the warmth of her hand in his, and the simple, profound joy of finally meeting someone he had come to know so deeply. Sleep was elusive, replaced by a mixture of nervous excitement and tender anticipation. In those quiet hours, he also reflected on the journey of love itself. He realized that this experience had taught him patience, faith, and the courage to open his heart fully. It had shown him that true connection was built on honesty, respect, and shared values. Even before Elena arrived, he felt that he had learned something profound, that love is not just about proximity or chance encounters, but about understanding, communication, and the willingness to embrace vulnerability. Morning finally arrived, breaking the long night with soft sunlight streaming through the windows. James rose early, feeling a restless energy coursing through him. He checked the house one last time, ensuring everything was perfect. The fresh flowers were arranged just so, the linens were crisp, and the meals were ready. Every detail mattered. because he wanted Elena to feel that she was coming into a home filled not only with comfort, but with care, thoughtfulness, and genuine warmth. As he stepped outside, he looked toward the distant road, imagining the moment he would finally see her. His heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Each passing car made him glance up, wondering if it could be her. The morning air was alive with possibility, carrying the promise of a new chapter in his life. For months, he had prepared for this moment emotionally, mentally, and physically, and now it was finally here. He remembered the first letter she had sent, the careful words that had revealed her heart, and the shared dreams that had grown into a bond neither distance nor time could weaken. That connection had carried him through the lonely days and quiet nights, filling his home with hope and anticipation. And now, standing on the threshold of their first meeting, he felt a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a deep, abiding sense of joy. James knew that life would never be the same after today. The waiting, the preparation, and the dreams had all led to this moment, the first time he would see Elena in person. The first time their words would become shared. Laughter, conversation, and connection in the same space. He felt ready to embrace it fully, to open his heart completely, and to welcome the love he had longed for with every fiber of his being. The hours passed slowly, each minute stretching with the weight of anticipation. James walked through the garden, tended the animals, and checked the mailbox, though he already knew she was on her way. The quiet of the day seemed charged with energy, every sound a reminder that something extraordinary was about to happen. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, he felt the first flutter of hope that the moment was finally near, the moment he had been waiting for all his life. As he stood at the edge of the porch, looking toward the horizon where she would arrive, James realized that the journey itself had been a gift. The months of letters, anticipation, and preparation had taught him the value of patience, the depth of hope, and the beauty of connection that transcends distance. He had learned that love was not something to be rushed, but something to be nurtured carefully, with thought, care, and respect. And now, finally, it was ready to bloom. The day had finally come. James woke before sunrise, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness he had never felt before. The sky was painted with soft shades of pink and gold, a quiet promise of new beginnings. He moved around the house with careful precision, checking every detail one last time. The fresh flowers on the table seemed brighter than ever, the linens crisp and welcoming, and the small home radiated warmth and care. Every corner held the intention of making Elena feel at home from the very first moment. As the hours slowly passed, James found it hard to concentrate on anything. He walked through the garden, watched the chickens, and tended to the few last chores, but his mind kept wandering to the moment when he would finally see Elena. He imagined her stepping off the plane, walking toward him with a mix of curiosity and anticipation, and wondered how it would feel to see the woman whose letters had carried so much meaning into his life. His heart raced at the thought. And yet, there was a quiet calm beneath it, a deep knowing that this meeting would change everything. When the taxi carrying her from the airport finally pulled up, James's stomach fluttered as if he were a boy again. Nervous and hopeful all at once, he stepped outside, his eyes fixed on the approaching figure. There she was, Elena, carrying a small bag, looking around as if taking in the new world she had traveled so far to reach. The letters, the anticipation, the months of hope, all led to this single moment, and when their eyes met, everything else seemed to disappear. For a heartbeat, they simply stared, unsure of what to say, each trying to read the other's thoughts. Then, slowly, a smile spread across Elena's face, lighting up her features, and James felt something in his chest give way. A warmth, a recognition, a sense of home he had never known before. She stepped forward, and their hands met. A simple touch that carried the weight of months of words, dreams, and hope. The awkwardness melted almost instantly, replaced by a gentle comfort and the spark of connection that had grown between them through letters. They laughed softly, a little nervously at first, then with more ease, as if the laughter had been waiting for this moment all along. Elena's voice, warm and melodic, seemed even more real than James had imagined, carrying the same sincerity and kindness he had felt in her words on paper. They exchanged small greetings, careful at first, then more relaxed, each gesture and glance reinforcing the bond they had nurtured from afar. Every smile, every laugh, every shared glance seemed to weave them closer together. Walking back to James's home, they talked about the journey she had made, the sights she had seen, and the excitement she felt at finally meeting him. James shared stories about the town, the fields, and the little details of life that had filled his letters. The conversation flowed naturally, like two rivers joining, merging months of words into a reality that was even more vibrant and meaningful than either had imagined. Elena's eyes lit up as James spoke of his routines, his animals, and the garden he had tended for years. And he could see the warmth of understanding and admiration in her gaze. At the house, James showed her the preparations he had made, from the neatly arranged room to the small touches of care in every corner. Elena was visibly moved, smiling at each detail and expressing gratitude in soft, heartfelt words. She touched the fresh linens, admired the flowers, and laughed lightly at the little surprises he had prepared. It was clear that the effort he had put into making her feel welcome had succeeded, and James felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that the home he had built in hope was now a place of warmth and love, ready to embrace her. They spent the afternoon talking, learning even more about each other. James listened as Elena shared stories of her childhood, her family, and the journey that had led her to take this bold step. She spoke of the hopes she carried in her heart, the dreams she had nurtured, and the quiet courage it had taken to come so far. James shared his own memories, the quiet joys of life on the farm, the lessons he had learned from solitude, and the anticipation that had grown with every letter. With every word, the distance that had once separated them vanished, leaving only a sense of closeness and belonging. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the windows, they prepared a simple meal together. Elena helped in the kitchen, laughing at the little mistakes they made along the way, and James felt a joy unlike any he had known. The meal was simple but filled with care, and as they sat together at the table, sharing food and conversation, it was clear that something profound had begun. This was more than just a first meeting, it was the foundation of a life built on trust, respect, and shared hope. After dinner, they stepped outside into the quiet evening. The fields stretched before them, bathed in soft moonlight, and James felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. They walked side by side, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply enjoying the comfortable silence. Each step felt significant, a step into a future they would create together. The air was filled with the quiet music of nature, and for James, it was the perfect backdrop to the beginning of a new chapter. Over the next few days, they explored the town together. Elena marveled at the small shops, the friendly neighbors, and the slow rhythm of life that James had always loved. They laughed at minor misunderstandings, shared stories with curious neighbors, and slowly fell into the natural rhythm of living side by side. Every shared experience, no matter how small, seemed to deepen their bond, transforming the connection they had nurtured through letters into a tangible, living reality. Even in the mundane moments, there was magic. Cooking together, tending to the animals, and caring for the home brought them closer. James noticed the way Elena's eyes lit up when she learned a new task, the way she laughed at small mishaps, and the warmth of her presence in the spaces he had once occupied alone. Elena, in turn, discovered the simple joys of life on the farm, appreciating the patience and dedication James poured into every aspect of his home. The ordinary had become extraordinary because they experienced it together. In the evenings, they would sit by the fireplace, talking about their hopes for the future. James spoke of the life he dreamed of, building a life filled with kindness, laughter, and shared work. Elena shared her own visions, the small joys she hoped to cultivate, and the family she dreamed of nurturing. They spoke of love not as a grand, dramatic force, but as something steady, patient, and real. Something they could grow together every day. The firelight flickered across their faces, illuminating not just their features but the deepening connection between their hearts. One night, as they stepped outside to look at the stars, James took Elena's hand in his. The gesture was simple but full of meaning, a promise, a reassurance, and a recognition of the journey they had taken to reach this moment. Elena smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. And in that shared glance, they both understood that this was the beginning of something enduring. The months of letters, anticipation, and preparation had led them to a place where words became reality and hearts became home. Days turned into weeks, and their bond continued to grow stronger. Each morning brought new routines, shared laughter, and the joy of companionship. James discovered that love was not just about grand gestures, but about small, consistent acts of care and understanding. Elena realized that the quiet life she had once imagined could be vibrant and full when shared with someone who truly understood her heart. Together, they learned the rhythms of each other's lives, finding comfort in familiarity and joy in discovery. Neighbors soon noticed the change in James. The quiet man, who had once lived alone, now moved with a lighter step, his smile more frequent, his laughter more genuine. Elena became a beloved presence in the town, admired not only for her courage, but for the warmth and kindness she brought into every interaction. Together, they embodied a love that was patient, nurturing, and deeply real, a love that had grown from letters into life itself. And so, life continued, filled with small joys and shared moments that built a foundation for the future. James and Elena had discovered that true love was not about instant perfection or dramatic romance, but about two hearts meeting with honesty, respect, and hope. The journey that had begun with letters across miles had culminated in the warmth of shared days, the comfort of companionship, and the certainty that home was not a place, but a heart found in another person. In the quiet evenings, when the wind rustled through the trees and the fields lay bathed in silver moonlight, James often reflected on the journey that had brought Elena into his life. Every letter, every shared hope, and every moment of patience had led to this profound happiness. And as he held her hand, feeling the warmth of her presence, he knew that love had finally found its home, not in the letters alone, but in the hearts that had dared to wait, hope, and believe. Together, they had learned that love, when nurtured with care and honesty, could bridge any distance. They had discovered that patience, hope, and courage could turn longing into reality. And most importantly, they had found that two hearts, once separated by miles in time, could finally create a home in each other where words became actions, letters became laughter, and anticipation became a lifetime of shared happiness.